What's up, winners? Welcome back to the Pylon Cam Fantasycast, episode 7. We are knee-deep into the season. If you are 0-4, 0-5, or 1-4 and 0-5, I'm sorry, but probably time to pack it in. I don't know if you could do much to salvage what's left. But, you know, you could always try because as a winner, we don't give up. Winners don't give up, and on this channel, we do not give up. But the league is in full swing. Injuries are getting worse by the week. Waiver wire is getting more and more important to know what you're doing, to know who to pick up, to who to put down, to who to give the bada bing and who to give the bada boom. There's a few players that we're going to talk about, like always, favorite waiver wire ads for running backs, tight ends, and wide receivers. But then we're going to talk about my favorite trade targets. We'll talk through the value of each player on the trade target list as in what you should spend for those players. But I think that there's going to be a price to pay for everybody, and it depends what league you're in. If you're in Dynasty, Redraft, Superflex, whatever. But as always, I try to keep QBs off the list because QBs are a dime a dozen, and kind of like similar to tight ends, they're very, you know, here or there you could pick up. The difference in points per week is very small compared to the elite at the top, like your Lamars, your Jalen Hurtses, your Kylers. But when you're looking at like your Joe Burrows, your Trevor Lawrences, even Davis Mills, who had a fantastic week last week, there's not too much of a price to pay, or not even. You could probably get them off waiver wires if it's a 1 QB league or whatever. But without further ado, let's get into it. If you're watching on YouTube, you're like, oh my God, Mike isn't bald. He has hair. Yes, I finally got a haircut so I could unleash my beautiful flow to you guys. But we're going to start with the running backs as always. I try to put different players on these lists each week because I don't want to give you the same information each week, and changes happen, situations change, etc. So I try to do my best and keep these lists as fresh as possible and with the most information, new information, current information, information, whatever you want to call it, as possible. So let's start talking about the running backs. So I did keep two teams, technically 3 players on this list because I think that for one of the situation is kind of changing. But first up, Damian Williams and Khalil Herbert. So Damian Williams did see the lion's share of the snaps for this week, but Khalil Herbert performed very well with the limited snap count he had at the end of the game. So I'm just going to pull up the stats. So Khalil Herbert played 50% of the snaps. He had 18 attempts for 75 yards. He was averaging 4.17 yards per attempt and had 7.5 fantasy points at PPR. Unfortunately, he didn't see any targets, which I thought they were going to use him more as the pass-catching back. But compared to Damian Williams, who saw only 48% of the snaps, so he had a lower snap count, but where his snaps were seen were primarily on the goal line, and he had less attempts than Herbert. He had 64 yards, so less yards, but he did have a touchdown. And he saw 3 targets with 2 receptions for 20 yards. Which is interesting because, you know, Damian Williams, 29 years old, he's definitely not in the future of the Bears offense, and future matters little in redraft leagues, but it also does matter at the same time because, for instance, for in this scenario, I do think that Damian Williams will not be phased out immediately, but I think that there's more value for the Bears in Khalil Herbert because I do believe they're going to use him. Their outlook for Khalil Herbert is to have him be Tariq Cohen. They want him. They did pay Tariq Cohen, but again, like the Bears are horrible team at managing their cap situation. They're terrible at it. They have not paid a quarterback for years and are constantly in cap trouble, which is that's impressive to be in cap trouble without paying your quarterback. But they do stupid stuff like pay Tariq Cohen, who I think they paid him right when he came off the ACL tear, or right before the ACL tear, and then he's still on the PUP list. So the outlook for the Bears is definitely have Khalil Herbert come in and replace Tariq Cohen and have David Montgomery continue to be their workhorse. But in the interim, I think that the points for this week are misleading because Damian Williams had 16.4 in PPR leagues and Tariq Cohen had 7.5 in PPR leagues. So if you take away the touchdown from Damian Williams and not even give it to Khalil Herbert, you're looking at identical points. So Khalil Herbert is definitely still on waivers if you own David Montgomery. I picked up Khalil Herbert in a lot of dynasty leagues thinking that he would be next up if Montgomery went down. But that wasn't the case. But now it's starting to seem like they're going to – this split is going to be a lot more 50-50 than it originally anticipated. So I like Khalil Herbert. I think he actually is a better talent than Damian Williams. Damian Williams is a veteran who, more years, more experience in the league. So Damian Williams definitely going to get the initial surge of touches. But as we're seeing, that's not even the case because Khalil Herbert out-snapped him, rushed him in yards and attempts. He just didn't have a touchdown. So maybe this week against the Packers, you'll see Khalil Herbert get more involved in the passing game. But this is definitely a week against the Packers, a divisional game where anything could happen. I would be starting Damian Williams or Khalil Herbert, whoever I had, if I own David Montgomery and Damian Williams. If you own Damian Montgomery and don't have Damian Williams, start Khalil Herbert. If you have Damian Williams, start Damian Williams. Because Damian Williams will be the one to vulture touchdowns. That's going to happen no matter what because they're going to see him in the goal line. But I do think Khalil Herbert can score. Let's talk about the next person on this list, Chris Evans. So last week it was Samaje Perine and Chris Evans. This week it's just Chris Evans because let me just double check this real quick. But Samaje Perine is on the IR. I think it's for COVID. Yeah, he was placed on the reserve COVID-19 list on Monday because he tested positive. He could miss this week, but I do think that Chris Evans, like Khalil Herbert, is better than Samaje Perine. Perine did end up putting 20 points up even with Joe Mixon playing. He had the receiving touchdown, which really saved him for the week because he only had 11 attempts for 59 yards. So without his touchdown, he would have had, let's see here, he would have had about 9 points. A little over 10 points. But let's see what Chris Evans did this week because I think Chris Evans looked really, really good in the preseason, and I think he's definitely younger, bigger, stronger, faster than Samaje Perine. He had only played 10% of the snaps, but he did have 2 targets. And Joe Mixon is still hurt with that ankle injury. So if they are going to limit Joe Mixon, Chris Evans is next up, and don't look at what Chris Evans did last week and be like, oh, you're an idiot. Think about the situation. There is no Samaje Perine anymore. So the healthy back is now Chris Evans. So all of what Samaje Perine saw will now go to Chris Evans if Joe Mixon still is limited. I don't know if he will be limited, but I would stash Chris Evans just in case. I have Chris Evans in every league I have Joe Mixon because I really liked what I saw from Chris Evans in preseason. He looks like he could be in my opinion, I really think he could be the guy. He could be, if anything were to happen to Joe Mixon, I think that you give him this season and you give him next season. I think if Mixon's gone, Chris Evans definitely could take over this backfield. He has the pass-catching capabilities. He's 5'11", 220, which is like the perfect mold for a running back. The only thing that I really don't like about the Bengals is, so going into this season, I had Joe Mixon ranked really high on my personal running back list because I couldn't help but every time I looked at him, I couldn't help but see the same situation Najee Harris was in. You're the only back that's going to see 20 touches a game. You have a pretty mediocre O-line, and you have a quarterback who's coming off of injury. Now, Ben Roethlisberger wasn't coming off of injury, but he's old as dirt and looks like a carcass. But Joe Burrow would need that running back to lessen the workload. And I was right about that. The problem is this Bengals O-line has taken a huge step up in pass protection. Huge step up in pass protection compared to what they were last year. However, they are abysmal when it comes to run blocking. Like, actually terrible. So, take Chris Evans with a grain of salt. I think the value is what we're looking for in all these players is volume. I say this every week. The most important thing, one of the most important things of drafting a fantasy player or picking up a fantasy player is volume. Will they be on the field? Will they be touching the ball? Will they be scoring points? The volume is there for Chris Evans. Is the efficiency there for Chris Evans is the question. And I can't answer that for certain I think Chris Evans is going to be efficient with his touches. I think he could be. I think what would limit him is the offensive line play, not him as a talent. But let's go to the next player on this list. So if you missed it, I just want to make sure I'm right about this, but Clyde Edwards-Helaire is dealing with an MCL sprain. Let me just make sure it's an MCL and not another CL in your knee. But yeah, he's supposed to miss a few weeks with an MCL sprain. And next up is Daryl Williams. So if you missed out on Damian Williams, go ahead and snag Daryl Williams because it's going to be the same thing. And like we have seen all season, Daryl Williams has been eating on the goal line for Kansas City. And I think that now he's going to, I think he's efficient. I think he's a great running back. Let's see what he did last week. Let me just pull up the numbers since I have it pulled up. But Daryl Williams in line to take over this backfield for Kansas City. He's going to be the starting running back for this week. He's flirted with around 40% of snaps all season. His workload has only increased. It went from 22% to 27% to 34% to 36% to 43% against Buffalo. And he has had around 10 attempts per game, all which are in the goal line. He has 2 touchdowns on the season, and we've seen him get involved in the pass-catching game. He has 3 targets, 2 targets, and 5 targets. And now he's the guy. So they're playing a team like Washington that has had a very bad defense, very much so worse defense than anticipated. And I think that Daryl Williams is going to have the volume. He's the only back there. They have Jerick McKinnon, but what does that even mean? Because he's been buried on the depth chart for all season. He's been behind Helaire, and he's even behind Williams. So I think Daryl Williams is going to have a similar workload to Damian Williams, except without the Khalil Herbert handcuff. So way more upside in Daryl Williams for volume. He's going to see most of the touches. He's going to see most of the targets. And the Chiefs have a pretty good matchup this week against Washington. I think that Daryl Williams will have a great game. He's going to eat on the goal line. I think Daryl Williams is a great pickup this week. Let's talk about Davonte Booker next on the New York Giants. So if you haven't paid attention to football in Week 5, basically the entire Giants starting offense died. And that, I'm not even being facetious in that. That is a 100% true statement. What happened was it started with Saquon Barkley stepping on someone's ankle after a play. So he didn't even get hurt during a contact injury. He stepped on someone's foot and rolled his ankle, and it swelled up to the size of my microphone, which is about this big. And he's out for 3 weeks at least. Then Sterling Shepard and Darius Slayton have been out. Andrew Thomas didn't play, which is probably the most important player the New York Giants have, because without him, their O-line looked like Swiss cheese, and Daniel Jones got his brain mashed. He's out with the concussion. Nobody knows what the timetable is on that, so Mike Glennon will probably play. So if you need a quarterback, scoop Mike Glennon. I don't know what he'll do for you. But Davonte Booker came in, very efficient red zone running back. I don't know how much the Giants will be in the red zone, but he is in line to take all of the ground game. I think from what we've seen in the limited sample size we have from Gary Brightwell, who they drafted in the 6th round, I don't think Booker will be seeing much passing volume. That will probably go to Brightwell. So you could bank on the upside with Brightwell, but I think with how run-dependent this team has become, because also Kenny Galladay is going to miss this week against the Rams with a hyperextended knee, so he's out for the week. And then, I think that's everybody. They are down to literally 4 offensive starters with, I think, Nate Solder, Evan Engram, Kadarius Toney, and Will Hernandez. I think that's it. So I don't know how much production you'll get from Booker, but he will have the volume to produce. That's why he's on this list. The Rams defense hasn't looked as good as it was anticipated to look. Like last year, it finished at number 1. I think this year it's around 17th. So I don't know what to expect from Booker. I don't know what he'll do for you, but he'll probably get you around 10 points just off of his volume alone. He's not a bad running back. He's very good in the red zone. He's volume. I mean, he's points. That's for sure. And then someone I have on this list is not for this week, but Marlon Mack. The Colts have been a report came out, I think, 2 weeks ago at this point, that Marlon Mack and the Colts have mutually agreed to explore trade options. And a team that has expressed interest as of, I think, this morning, or maybe yesterday. Today is October 12th. The Chiefs. The Chiefs have explored interest in Marlon Mack, or expressed interest in Marlon Mack. So Marlon Mack may be headed to Kansas City. I don't really like the landing spot since they have Khalil and Williams. I was kind of hoping for, like, the Ravens or... I'm trying to think off the top of my head. The Ravens, I'm trying to think of a team who needs a running back. Maybe even the Chargers. They kind of need that bruiser back to preserve Austin Eckler, who's having a great season. The Dolphins desperately need a running back. The Bills need a running back, even though Zach Moss has been good. But yeah, I would pick up Marlon Mack because he will be traded soon. I don't know where. If he goes to the Chiefs, you probably can drop him because I don't know how much he will produce on the Chiefs because the Chiefs aren't really a run-heavy offense anyway. So it's interesting that they're looking to acquire him. But I think that if you pick up anybody on this list, they're going to have volume. They're going to get you points. I don't know how many. Anybody on this list, I'm anticipating scoring 10 points. That's why they're on this list because that's a great waiver wire pickup, in my opinion, for the week. So that is going to do it for the running back situation. I think that some of these guys you probably can move off of after this week, like Daryl Williams. I would say Chris Evans is the only one on this list that you can move off after a week. Marlon Mack, I would hold until he lands somewhere because he's not getting the work on the Colts. He probably won't get much work on the Chiefs. If he goes to the Dolphins, great pickup. I think that they would use him well, especially with Tua and Jacoby Brissett struggling as much as they are. But that's going to do it for the running backs. Let's talk about the wide receivers. So with the wide receivers on this list, we've talked about it every week, and I like to preface it just in case there's new listeners out there. Wide receivers, in my opinion, typically are week to week, as in they're in position to have a great week because of the circumstances and because of the nature of the wide receiver role. The wide receiver role, you gain volume each week depending on your previous performance and what you do off the ball. What do your routes look like off the ball? Are you drawing defenders away from the intended target? How are you looking in run and pass blocking if you have to block someone? Or if you're running a screen, how do you look in run blocking in that situation? So wide receivers are someone who they are pretty much boom or bust every week, but there are the players where circumstances dictate how much volume they'll see an increase or decrease. So I think the ones on this list, I replaced 2 of them, but I think 2 of them you are still looking good to stash. Number 1, he was number 1 last week, Jamison Crowder. Jamison Crowder saw 9 targets in his first outing with the Jets. He came off of injury and immediately kidnapped volume from Corey Davis. This past week, he had another 6 targets, 4 completions for only 24 yards. So he had, I'm sorry. Played 61% of the snaps, 6 targets, 4 catches for 24 yards, 6 yards per catch. Somehow ended up with, I'm trying to figure out how this math works. But again, he went from 9 targets to 6 targets, which was that's good. That's good volume for a waiver wire wide receiver. That is great volume. And I think that, in this Jets offense that's going to struggle, this is someone who you definitely could stash. Now, they're going into a bye, but I'm telling you to pick up Crowder this week because a lot of teams who are competing and need that extra bench spot will probably drop Jamison Crowder. And I think that in his 2-game sample size, he's averaging 61.5% of snaps, and he had 20 points in his first game, and he had 6 points in his second game. They play New England off of the bye, which is interesting because Zach Wilson got absolutely annihilated by New England. He threw 4 interceptions. Then they play Cincinnati. And I think that we're not looking for Jamison Crowder to have a 100-yard day. That's not what we're looking for because he's coming off of waivers. We're just looking for him to catch passes, especially in PPR formats. So I think Crowder definitely could get you 5 catches, and let's say he gets 10 yards per catch. And Zach Wilson tends to throw the ball deeper down the field than most people. So whether it's a good throw or a bad throw, I think those 5 catches will equate to 10 points if they're 10 yards per catch, which is pretty likely. And plus, like, there's always the possibility for yak. So I like Jamison Crowder. I mean, I'm looking at the stats right now. He only had 4 catches for 24 yards, still at 6 points. So you add the extra catch, you add an extra 6 yards going off of his average. That's about 9 points. So say what you want about the Jets, Jamison Crowder. We don't care. We just care about volume. This is not, like, I would never, if I'm talking about NFL, like the NFL for what it is and who's good, who's bad, Jamison Crowder would never be on any list I make. But for fantasy, he's got volume, and that's all we care about at the end of the day. So let's talk about the next person on this list, Zach Pascal. Now, I think everybody was anticipating Paris Campbell to be Zach Pascal for the Colts. Let's look at some stats for Zach Pascal because I think that he's been kind of flying under the radar. He's flashed a few times, but for fantasy, he's had 16 points, 9 points, 3 points, 4 points, 8 points. So why would I have him on this list? Because he's flirting with 60% of the snaps, but he's seeing 16.7% of the team's targets. Most of the targets on this team actually go to Michael Pittman. But in the snap distribution, he's 20%, and Michael Pittman is 21%. And then the next closest to Pascal is Paris Campbell at 10%. So Zach Pascal is on the field for, at the very least, 80% of snaps. He did not play against Baltimore. Oh, no, it hasn't been logged for Baltimore yet. But Pascal had a pretty good game against Baltimore. I'm pretty sure. Let me just double check. Pascal. Yeah, he had another 7-point game, which is what you need. But he has the potential to be a 20-point or 15-point guy. Let's look at his first game against Seattle. 91% of the snaps, 5 targets, 4 catches, 43 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Game 2 against the Rams. 91% of the snaps, 6 targets, 5 receptions, and a touchdown. And then, going throughout the season, he had 89% of snaps, 82% of snaps, 86% of snaps. But he has had at least 5 targets through 5 games with at least 3 catches. So, and he's averaging roughly like 14 yards per catch. So the volume is there. He definitely is seeing the targets, and he has a nose for the end zone. They're playing Houston this week, which I think definitely is a game where Zach Pascal can score. Houston's defense is trash. Houston is trash. But I think when you put him in an offense with Carson Wentz, who has a big arm, he's not the best quarterback, but he does have a huge arm. Jonathan Taylor, who's going to force Texans to stack a box. And you have a speedy slot guy like Zach Pascal. Or not a slot guy, excuse me. A speedy receiver like Zach Pascal. Definitely room for him to get points, to get you points. And he has the volume to back it up. So I like Pascal. Again, he's definitely someone flying under the radar. His volume is there. Paris Campbell is the next closest receiver, and he has seen 61% of snaps, 79% of snaps, and 46% of snaps through 4 weeks. I don't like Campbell. I don't think he's seeing the volume that was anticipated, and all of that volume is funneling into Pascal. So if you need a flex guy for the week, definitely check to see if Pascal's on waivers. Great waiver ad, and he's going to get the job done. And then next player on this list is someone who everybody who DM'd me on Instagram, DM'd me on Twitter, or texted me in real life, obviously, was like, who should I pick up off of waiver, or who should I start this week? And I said, let me see waivers. And everybody, and I mean literally everybody who is in a redraft league, Kadarius Toney was on waivers. And, you know, we talk about this a lot on this podcast. What do the circumstances look like? What does the situation look like? Going into this week, I picked up Kadarius Toney and acquired Kadarius Toney in every league I'm in before week 4, so going into week 4, because I knew I'm a Gators fan, and I've watched this kid play. I know what he's capable of. All my buddies who were at my house during the draft saw me have a literal meltdown when the Giants passed on Rashawn Slater and Micah Parsons. And then they saw my reaction to the Kadarius Toney pick and were like, dude, what? Why are you so excited about Kadarius Toney? He's not even like this, what did they say? Like the 7th best receiver in this draft. And I was like, bro, if this kid played on a team without Kyle Pitts, he would probably be in the top 3 conversations with Waddle, Smith, and Chase. And after 2 games, like let's keep in mind, after 2 games, this kid has more receiving yards than, let me pull up the tweet because some ignoramus tweeted this and someone tagged me in it because you know when like you tweet something and it just ages so poorly? Like if you're on Twitter, that's like the last thing that you ever want to happen. But this is what this kid said. Never forget, Kadarius Toney was selected before, Rashad Bateman, Terrace Marshall Jr., Elijah Moore, Rondale Moore, De'Ami Brown, ... That's bad. In 2 games, and all of these receivers have played 5 games except for Rashad Bateman. In 2 games, Kadarius Toney has more yards than Terrace Marshall, Elijah Moore, Rondale Moore, De'Ami Brown. Part of it? Yeah. Circumstances. Darius Slayton's not there. Sterling Shepard's not there. But in games that he's played with Kenny Golladay there, Saquon there, and Evan Ingram there, he has passed all of those receivers on this list, all those rookies. This kid is actually incredible. He has, like, it's only been 2 games. I'm super high on him because I'm a huge Gators fan, but I know what he can do with the ball in his hands, and we now witnessed him where he's the only guy out there. If you watch the Giants-Cowboys game, America's game, he could be a wide receiver 1. And he dusted Trayvon Diggs. He had 10 catches for 187 yards. 189 yards, actually. This kid, you're not going to get this kid anymore. He's gone. However, if he's still there, for whatever reason, you got some Giants haters in your group. Like, again, I have a Jets player on this list. Would I ever care about a Jets player if I'm talking about the NFL like I do on Thursdays? Absolutely not. Would I really care about a Giants player being an elite wide receiver? Not really. Kadarius Toney, on top of his fantasy value, could actually be an elite wide receiver in the NFL. When he was called up to be the one, the Giants were missing Sterling Shepard, Darius Slayton, Kenny Golladay. He still performed at an elite level and almost had 200 yards. It probably would have had 200 yards if he didn't punch someone in the face. So, please, I'm begging you, it's the last time I'm going to be able to beg you because after this week it's not going to be able to happen again. He had 200 yards. If he's there, get him. And he did this with Mike Glennon. He didn't even have Daniel Jones. He did this with Mike Glennon. Please pick up Kadarius Toney. Please. I'm begging you. And then the last player on this list, Amon-Ra St. Brown. So I have been high on St. Brown. He's playing for the Detroit Lions. I've been high on St. Brown since the draft. I drafted him in a bunch of dynasty leagues. The thing is with St. Brown, why I liked St. Brown a lot was because I was like, okay, the Lions have literally no receiver on their roster. They don't have anybody. That's why TJ Hawkinson and DeAndre Swift are leading their team in receiving yards. But I had been waiting for St. Brown to break out, and I was kind of shocked with his snap percentages when I looked at it, but they're starting to go back up, and he's seeing, the past 2 weeks, he's seen 8 targets per game. And he has 6 receptions and 70 receptions for 70 yards and 65 yards. He's seeing 13.8% of the team's snap percentage, or target percentage, and he is tied for second with Quintez Cephas for snap distribution. It is Khalif Raymond at 21%. Khalif Raymond was on this list last week. He didn't perform that well this week against Minnesota, but Khalif Raymond, still the alpha guy for the Lions. Amon-Ra St. Brown is emerging as the dominant wide receiver too. Looking at their snap percentages, he's out-snapped Quintez Cephas for 2 out of 5 weeks and is starting to dominate Quintez Cephas' snap percentage. This week, Quintez Cephas played 33% of snaps. St. Brown, 70% of snaps. St. Brown is a good player. He's a very touted college prospect, and now he's seeing the targets. So you definitely could get St. Brown on waivers. Again, it's like a Lions player, so there's not going to be that much efficiency to these targets, but it's still volume. You still care about the volume that each player is going to see, because in PPR leagues, and I talk a lot about PPR leagues, but even for standard, you still care about volume. The targets don't matter as much because of PPR, targets are points, or receptions are points, but you care that my receiver is getting the ball and he's getting yards. So St. Brown may not be as appealing for PPR leagues, but he's still seeing volume. And I think in an offense where they have a pretty favorable schedule kind of coming up, like they play Cincinnati this week, which is going to be a decent game for them, but then they play the Rams and the Eagles, tough matchups. Then they go into a bye, and then they play Pittsburgh, which is a favorable matchup. Cleveland is not a favorable matchup. Chicago is a favorable matchup. Minnesota is a favorable matchup. And then Atlanta is a favorable matchup. And Seattle and Green Bay. So this is a player you definitely could keep picking up and putting down, picking up and putting down. Because if he gets picked up in between Cincinnati and the next game that matters, which is 3 weeks from there, someone will pick him up and then drop him because they play the Rams where he's not going to do anything, Philly where he probably won't do anything. Then they go into a bye. He'll definitely be dropped by then. Pick him up for Pittsburgh. You could drop him when they play Cleveland. You could pick him up when they play Chicago. And then you hold him when they play Minnesota, drop him when they play Denver. Then someone will pick him up when they play Arizona. Someone will drop him. Then you pick him up when he plays Atlanta. And then you keep him until the end of the season. So St. Brown has the volume. He has a pretty favorable matchup. A pretty favorable schedule if you play it right. You could hold him. I just think that he's not going to be that worth it on your bench. But we're kind of to the point where in the season where you just need someone who's in a situation to get points. But that's going to do it for the receivers on this list. Let's talk about tight ends. So I've talked about this for a while, but tight end is a very fascinating position this year because it's not seeing the typical value it usually does. Usually it's kind of a tighter knit group, but over the past 2 years, really, it's gone, like this year and last year, it's really, you have the elite, like your Kelsey, Hawkinson, Andrews, and then it kind of drops off to your like Gesicki's, your trying to think, like your Hunter Henrys, your Johnny Smiths of last year, and then it kind of your Goddards, and then it drops off even further to nothing. So the volume for tight ends is very, very, very interesting. But there will always be someone who has value because of, again, at this point in the season, we're looking for situations and circumstances where this guy's going to get more volume and get me points. I just smacked the microphone, so if you heard that, I'm sorry. But let's talk about it. First up on this list is David Njoku. This is interesting to me that he, just the circumstance, because in my opinion, David Njoku is the most talented tight end on that roster, and they, refuse to use him. He did get hurt last year and did want to get traded, but now we're starting to see an uptick in his volume. I just want to pull up some things because I didn't look at these numbers super in-depth, so I'm just going to pull it up. But David Njoku, in my opinion, is a better athlete than Austin Hooper. He's a better athlete than Hunter Bryant, or what's his name? The other tight end on their roster. I'm forgetting his name. Harrison Bryant. And, he doesn't play that many snaps. I guess because Austin Hooper is probably a better blocker, but David Njoku is definitely a better pass catcher and definitely a better athlete than Austin Hooper is. But let's look at his numbers. He's seeing 13.1% of the team's targets, which is very good. He's trying to see real quick who's seeing the other percentage of targets. I cannot find it. Anyways, David Njoku starting to come alive in the pass catching game. In the past 5 weeks, he's seen 5 targets week 1, 3 targets, no targets, 2 targets, 7 targets, and Jarvis Landry is definitely in no position to come back anytime soon, and Baker Mayfield has never been able to make Odell Beckham work. So when he does need to pass, he's going to look at his tight ends, and I think David Njoku is the most talented tight end on this roster. We're starting to see an uptick in his targets. Last week against the Chargers, he had 7 catches for 149 yards and a touchdown. Monster week for Njoku. And his snap count is being pretty consistent around 50%. Again, like we always talk about, if you listen to the podcast, the NFL coverage podcast, the biggest thing for tight ends to see playing time is block. You have to be able to block. And same thing with running backs. You need to be able to block if you want to play, if you want to see targets at tight end. Like, it's the most important thing in that position. Same thing with running back. You need to be able to run. You need to be able to pass block it from the running back position. But anyway, David Njoku definitely in a position to get points, to keep getting points. He is like a freak athlete. They just do not play him, and I think that they're starting to play him more. And he's seeing a pretty decent depth of target at his air yards are 15.9 as through week 5. So they're targeting him on pretty intermediate deep ball routes, deep route concepts. I like David Njoku. He doesn't have the consistency for me to ever want to keep him, but the next 2 weeks are going to be tough for him. They play Arizona and then Denver. Then he's going to have a good week against Pittsburgh. Then they play Cincinnati and New England, and then yeah. But I do like David Njoku. I think he's athletic enough, and the Browns are a good enough team to scheme to get him open. And I think he's a way better tight end than Austin Hooper. Next player on this list is Ricky Seals-Jones. Ricky Seals-Jones is filling in for what's his name? Logan Thomas. And Ricky Seals-Jones, this is a player where you can't really look at his stats because he hasn't played that much. But we saw in week 2 against the Giants, he had that nice back shoulder fade or back of the end zone catch against New York Giants. Taylor Heinicke, again, like if you follow this channel, you know I'm not a Taylor Heinicke fan. I think he's probably the most overrated quarterback in the entire NFL. And his mistakes will catch up with him. I correctly predicted that Taylor Heinicke would throw 2 picks and lose by 10 to the Saints. But Ricky Seals-Jones, like, again, Taylor Heinicke, I don't know why this isn't common knowledge by now. If Terry McLaurin is not open, he throws to his tight end. And if tight end's not open, he throws to Terry McLaurin. That's why he throws picks. And that's why you saw an uptick in Logan Thomas points, and you saw an uptick in Terry McLaurin points because he just throws it to one of the two. And if they're not open, oh well, he's still throwing it. So I like Ricky Seals-Jones because of his situation. He is the number 1 tight end there with Logan Thomas being out for at least 2 more weeks, I think. So definitely stash Ricky Seals-Jones. I picked him up in a bunch of leagues. I think he's got great value in his situation. And in an offense where Washington really doesn't care, they're just going to throw it. They literally hand the offense over to Taylor Heinicke and just say, go play. And Taylor Heinicke does that. Taylor Heinicke is a good fantasy quarterback. So for that reason, I think Ricky Seals-Jones is going to be a good fantasy tight end. I don't know if he'll be a really good tight end in real life, but from what we've seen, he balls. Like, he balls in fantasy. He had let me pull it up real quick. This Washington team plays the Chiefs this week, who have the worst defense in the NFL, and in 2 games starting, or 1 game starting, he's already seeing 8% of the team snaps. And to my surprise, he is playing. Hold up. Just let me see what this says. In the last 4 weeks, he's played. He went from 10% of snaps, or 18, 10, 14, to 92% of snaps and 99% of snaps. So he's on the field enough to see enough volume, and like I said, Taylor Heinicke either throws to Terry McLaurin or his tight end. So we're good. Like, in the past 2 games started, he's seen 4 targets and 8 targets, and against the Chiefs, he'll probably see about 8 targets again. So go ahead and pick up Ricky Seals-Jones. Definitely could start him. So definitely a cheeky little pickup right there if you could still get him, but I like Ricky Seals-Jones, especially for this week against the Chiefs. Next up, we got Dan Arnold. Dan Arnold, if you didn't know, was traded to the Jaguars in week 3 for... Who did they give him? I forget the details of that trade, but Dan Arnold, veteran tight end, he's played he played 50% of snaps against who do they just play? The Titans. And we're starting to see that this Jaguars offense is definitely starting to be more trigger happy. They have been trigger happy all year, but I think that with DJ Chark going down, they can't figure out what to do with Laviska Shenault, and Marvin Jones is still that guy who's just going down the field. Dan Arnold is going to see an uptick in targets and snap percentage. I think that he's the best tight end they have on their roster. He's competing with Jacob Hollister, Luke Farrell, and Chris Manhertz. But Luke Farrell is a rookie out of Ohio State, and this past week, Dan Arnold played the week after he got traded. So he didn't play week 3 because he was being traded, and then he played week 4. Probably didn't know the playbook, so he only played 31% of snaps. Week 5, which was his first real week, 74% of snaps, and he had 8 targets. So again, the volume is there for Dan Arnold, and he was a good tight end for the Cardinals. And the Cardinals are probably kicking themselves over this trade because, yeah, they got I think they got a 4th-round pick for him, or a 6th-round pick, but Max Williams, who was on this list last week, just tore his ACL and is out for the season. I think he tore his ACL and is out for the season, but he just got moved to IR. Not too sure of the details, but like I said, targets are there for Dan Arnold. Snap count is there for Dan Arnold. That's what we're looking for. We want to see, with any fantasy player, are they on the field, and what are they doing when they're on the field? And looking at the numbers, Dan Arnold is on the field, and he's getting targets. Because, again, this Jaguars team cannot figure out what to do with Laviska Shenault. There was so much hype around Laviska Shenault going into the season, and he has just not lived up to that in the slightest because they just don't know, they cannot make this kid work, and I don't get it. And really, what I think it is, they keep trying to, Urban Meyer is still, all of the off-the-field crap aside, Urban Meyer has gotten better each week, in each week in the NFL. And, they did just lose to the Bengals on Thursday night, but they looked better. That was their best game as a team, and I think that, this game against the Titans, again, they looked better. They're still competitive. The thing with the Jaguars of why I'll never power rank them 32nd is because they score points every week. I don't know how many points they're averaging at each week. Let me actually look it up because that's an interesting stat to know. And if you want to know where I get these stats from, I go to Yahoo Sports. They have a great breakdown of team stats and player stats for each week, where they rank and everything. But, so, on paper, you would see, oh, wow, the passing yards for the Jaguars are 27th. The rushing offense is 6th, and they're scoring 19 points per game, which is better than most. The Jets, for a while, were scoring, or better than some, not most. But they've gotten better. They have slowly moved up the list of points per game. They may not have leapfrogged anybody yet, but each week they're scoring more points. So I like Dan Arnold. I think this Jaguars offense is getting better and will continue to get better. Say what you want about Urban Meyer. He is adjusting each week. James Robinson was virtually MIA for the first 2 weeks, and now they have the 6th best rushing offense, and Trevor Lawrence is starting to use his legs a lot more. I think he's rushed for 140 yards through 5 weeks. Could be wrong there, but it's close to that number. Actually, I could look it up if you want. Couldn't hurt. But anyway, I'll look it up later. The last player I have on this list is Mo Alley Cox. I have had a Colts player in every list for wide receiver and running back, because I've said this a lot on this channel that nobody had a harder strength of schedule than the Indianapolis Colts, and that's still continuing. They've played the Rams, the Seahawks, the Titans, Miami, which they won, which is a game they should have won. Then they played Baltimore. 4 really hard games. But they're starting to get better. They're getting better. They're scoring points each week. And Mo Alley Cox is seeing 8% of the team's targets. But let's look at his snap count. what does it look like the past few weeks? So we're seeing Jack Doyle, who was the leading tight end, go from 61, 74, 54 to 30, which is going down each week. Let's look at Mo Alley-Cox. 51, 42, 49, 69. So consistency and then a big leap. And Kylan Granson's getting more involved. I have him in a few dynasty leagues, but in terms of targets, Mo Alley-Cox has seen 5 and 4 targets the past few weeks. I think that's going to continue to go up. They're playing the Texans this week, and I think Carson Wentz has always liked throwing his tight ends, even back to his days at Philadelphia, and Frank Reich loves to use his tight ends. So I think Mo Alley-Cox has continued to get more involved in the passing game. His snap percentage is going to continue to climb. It'll probably balance out at around 72, 73%, I think, if I had to guess. But he is their primary red zone tight end, which is the biggest thing. I don't think that you're going to just pick up a league-winning tight end off of waivers, especially like with the options here. But I do like Mo Alley-Cox. I liked Mo Alley-Cox a lot last year. I had him on a lot of leagues. He's just a reliable tight end. But that's going to do it for the tight ends for this week. The last thing we're going to talk about is trade targets. So we're at a point in the fantasy season where if you are not winning games, you need to trade. I've been saying that since week 3 because week 3 is a fourth of the way through the season. No, it's not. It's a little bit over. Week 4 is a fourth of the way through the season. Math. Oh my gosh. But you need to trade. Trading. I know a lot of people are very scared to trade. They don't like it because they make one trade out of. They finally get the courage to trade and it goes sour, and then they're like, "This is why I don't trade." You have to trade because you have to look at everything in fantasy as an asset. You can always move your assets for different assets or better assets. So I'm a huge fan of trading. I think trading is actually one of the most fun parts of fantasy. I've made a ton of trades. This is my most interesting trade of the season that went really sour really fast, but I kind of have flipped it, and now it's going really well. We've talked about it before on the channel, but it was I traded away. It was before the season started, so it was not because of preseason jitters. It's before the season started. I have the timestamp. I traded Jamar Chase and DeAndre Swift. I got really cold feet on DeAndre Swift for Jonathan Taylor in a second. So initially, good trade. Then the season starts, horrible trade. But I've turned that second round pick into Mike Williams and Kadarius Toney. So now the trade looks like Jamar Chase and DeAndre Swift for Jonathan Taylor, Mike Williams, Kadarius Toney, and Chris Evans. So say what you want about the trade. It's definitely still, in my opinion, 50-50. Could it work? Could it not work? I'm really upset to let Jamar Chase go because I love the Bengals. I'm a huge Bengals fan. But I think that DeAndre Swift is kind of starting to come down to earth, and Jonathan Taylor is starting to go back to where he should have been. Tony is taking off, and Mike Williams is the best wide receiver in fantasy right now. And Chris Evans, it's in a dynasty league, so Chris Evans could take off within the next few years. So, again, some for now assets in Mike Williams, some future assets in, or some dynasty assets in Jonathan Taylor and Kadarius Toney, and then a future asset in Chris Evans. But that is the point of fantasy. You need to trade. Another trade I made, for instance, is who I traded away Christian McCaffrey for. It was Christian McCaffrey, Brandon Ayuk for Jonathan Taylor, Tony Pollard, and Allen Robinson, and then flipped Allen Robinson and Damian Harris for Julio Jones and David Montgomery. And now I'm trying to flip Julio Jones for something else because I just wanted Julio Jones because he's a sexy name, and someone will be like, "Oh yeah, I'll take Julio Jones." But anyway, that's my point. You need to be able to trade in fantasy, and you need to, if you want to salvage your season or compete to win, you need to trade. Because odds are injuries are going to happen. You're going to need to, your second round pick got hurt. I'm in one league where my first and second round pick got hurt. Christian McCaffrey got hurt. J.K. Dobbins out for the season. And then I have a buddy who got Michael Thomas, J.K. Dobbins, and then their third round pick also ended up getting hurt. So their season's kind of over. But if you trade, you could always salvage something. So let's talk about my favorite trade targets for week 5 or week 6, I guess. Number 1, Kadarius Toney. Again, this is someone that you could probably convince someone they're on the Giants, Mike Glennon's playing. That was a fluke game. and you could trade him for like, if you're in redraft, like I would definitely trade Julio Jones for Kadarius. You could probably trade Julio Jones for Kadarius Toney and something. But that's the point. Like you gotta be able to see your assets for what they are, and most importantly, what someone thinks of that asset. So you have to find that Atlanta Falcons fan or the Tennessee Titans fan in your league and be like, do you want Julio Jones? And then boom, you fleece him for something. So I like Kadarius Toney. I think he's a very good trade target. In redraft leagues, you could definitely get him. In dynasty leagues, you're probably going to have to pay more because even if it was a fluke game, someone's going to hold on and bank on that upside of like Kadarius Toney could be wide receiver 1 and do this every week. Again, he was the 20th overall pick of the 2021 draft, so he's not just some waiver wire kid or some 6th-round pick that just popped off for one game. This is a legit first-round pick who was in a national championship competing college offense. So he has the talent. He has the skill set. You're probably going to have to pay a price for him in Dynasty. In redraft leagues, I think you could kind of con someone into giving him to you. Like, you could definitely trade Julio Jones for, like, Allen Robinson and Kadarius Toney. I think that you would actually get away with that trade. Alvin Kamara, I think if you want to go into this and say, like, hey, Alvin Kamara has been pretty inconsistent. Reports are his role is changing. Jameis Winston doesn't like to throw him the ball. Like, week 4, he didn't have a single target for the first time in his career. So you could argue his role is changing and he's too hot and too cold. But, like, this is a player, like, you definitely would have to give up, like, something. But I think it's actually worth it because my outlook on Alvin Kamara has fluctuated all season long. I have no idea what to make of him. Going into the season, he was my RB3 with the potential to regress, which he has. And then I kind of hit the panic button. It was like, oh, crap, sell Alvin Kamara because he's not going to do the same. But I think the Saints are to a point where they are realizing Alvin Kamara is our best player. We need to get him the ball. So I think that's the outlook going forward. If I was trying to acquire Alvin Kamara, I would text that person and be like, hey, man, like, Alvin Kamara's role isn't the same. I don't know what you're looking for, but I could give you Tony Pollard and Julio Jones. I don't know why I keep using Julio Jones as the example, but you get my point. Like, you're going to have to pay you probably could get away with paying just under premium price for Alvin Kamara, but you probably still have to pay a high price for Alvin Kamara unless you find someone who's just fed up with him. So I would go after Alvin Kamara if you could. This player has been on this list for now 2 weeks, Davonte Williams, where you're seeing Davonte Williams' role only increase in the offense. He is the future of that Denver Broncos backfield. He's my favorite player of the 2021 draft. I'm a huge Davonte Williams fan. He's just a beast. He is actually just a beast. He saw only 8 rushing attempts this past week, but he had 3 targets for 25 yards, and he had 8 rushes for 61 yards. The kid is a monster. And this was against Pittsburgh, who has one of the best rushing defenses in the NFL. Melvin Gordon is slightly out-snapping him, but I think that, Denver kind of views Melvin Gordon as a disposable asset in that this is the last year of his contract. I have said this every week on the podcast. I've talked about Javonte Williams. I think that, we're going to look it up live. We are going to look up what Melvin Gordon's contract looks like right now, so I just know. So this is the last year of Melvin Gordon's contract, so they are going to run Melvin Gordon until he is dead. But their future is Javonte Williams. So I think that, they're going to use Melvin Gordon until he gets hurt, and until then, they are still splitting 50-50. It's kind of moving towards 60-40, but I think that in a game, like, you got to think of this as if you're the general manager. In a game where the risk for injury is higher because they have a great run-blocking defense in T.J. Watt, Cam Hayward, and the Pittsburgh Steelers, I would rather sacrifice my last-year contract running back in Melvin Gordon than my future rookie bell cow in Javonte Williams. So, for that reason, keep an eye on the games. But even still, like, Javonte Williams, with his limited snap count, had over 11 points in PPR leagues. So, I trade for him. I think that he's the future of this team, and they know that, and they're going to keep feeding him, and they want him to get better and develop. The next player on this list is Rashad Bateman. Rashad Bateman has not played yet. I thought he was going to play this week because reports were like he was trending towards playing, but they held him out another week. I do just want to see real quick who the Ravens play this week, but he will be on the field this week. And I think once he touches the field, he's going to be untouchable. Like, you're not going to be able to trade for him. But they play the Chargers this week, which is an interesting matchup. I have advocated if there is no tape on someone, they are that much more deadly. And all the reports coming from training camp was this kid is an absolute god. So I would go out and get Rashad Bateman. You probably could get him for cheap. You could probably pick him up off of waivers in redraft leagues. You're probably not going to get him in dynasty leagues unless you pay a premium for him. But I think this kid's going to be. I think in the NFL, so not for fantasy, the power rankings for rookie wide receivers are going to be Jamar Chase at 1, and then Rashad Bateman, Kadarius Toney 2 and 3. I don't know which order, but I think that these two are that talented. I think they just outclass every other rookie. Like they're out. Terrace Marshall's played 5 games, hasn't done anything. Elijah Moore has played 5 games or 4 games, hasn't done anything. Rondale Moore has flashed, nothing more. He's still playing under 50% of snaps and is in one of the most potent offenses in the NFL with an MVP quarterback. If you're not going to do anything with that, I don't think you're going to do anything really much ever. He's only 5'7" too. I'm trying to think. De'Ami Brown is like couldn't win the wide receiver 2 job when Curtis Samuel was out. So do it that way, you will. But I think it's going to be Chase and then Kadarius Toney, Rashad Bateman. Odell Beckham is someone you definitely can get for cheap, and I think he definitely will pop eventually. I have been high on Odell Beckham just because of the athlete he is. But with Jarvis Landry being out and they don't have that much to throw to, Odell Beckham is really the only guy who is going to take targets. I just want to see what his stats were for last week. So he didn't play the first 2 games, and he's still seeing 14% of the team's snaps. 1 game was with Jarvis Landry. He's seeing he only saw 3 targets against the Chargers, but he had 9 targets against Chicago, 7 targets against Minnesota. So it's safe to say that is an outlier. He played 63% of the snaps, 80% of snaps, 80% of snaps. And his only competition is Donovan Peoples-Jones. And, like, come on, like, who is a better athlete, Donovan Peoples-Jones or Odell Beckham? I am taking Odell Beckham every time. And as a quarterback, I'm throwing it to Odell Beckham instead. This is why I'm not going to get on it, but this is why Baker Mayfield's a bad quarterback. Anyway, A.J. Green is someone you definitely could get for cheap. He is playing like a premium wide receiver. He's outscored DeAndre Hopkins in the past, I think, 3 weeks, excluding last week. So not including week 5, but weeks 2 through 4, he's outperformed DeAndre Hopkins. He's playing. He's seeing the second most percentage of snaps. He's the alpha wide receiver 2 there, and Kyler Murray loves to throw the ball. So I would get. And he's coming off of a 3-point week where he only had 1 target, which is a huge outlier. You could definitely get him for cheap right now. I would trade for him. Keenan Allen is another player I would trade for. Mike Williams has asserted himself as the wide receiver 1 in terms of touchdowns, but Keenan Allen is still seeing the wide receiver 1 volume. So you could find someone who's very frustrated with Keenan Allen and go ahead and say, hey, I'll trade you Julio Jones and Tony Pollard for Keenan Allen, and you're winning that trade 10 out of 10 times because Keenan Allen is still seeing the most targets on that team. Mike Williams is seeing all the downfield targets and the red zone targets, but Keenan Allen will get those red zone targets eventually. It's going to happen. Plus, you have an elite quarterback in Justin Herbert. It'll happen. Tony Pollard is another player on this list. I think you could probably get him for cheap because of he's downtrending right now, and there's still the rumor of Zeke playing like his ankles. I think his knee is bothering him, which isn't a rumor. That is true, but he played through it against the Giants this week. He loves to play the Giants. But if anything were to happen to Zeke, like Tony Pollard's still like an 8 to 10 point running back every week, so very, very, very safe flex option. They're the most potent offense in the NFL. They just take whatever is there. If you give them the deep ball, they'll throw it. If you give them the intermediate ball, they'll throw it. If you give it to them in the flat, they'll throw it. If you're not stacking the box, they'll run it. So the Cowboys do everything very, very well, very exceptionally. And I like Tony Pollard. He's always got I think the lowest points he's had this week was 7, or this season. Let me check because I don't want to say that and just be wrong about it. But for PPR fantasy points, Tony Pollard has had. The lowest he's had is 7. He had 8.3, 23, 7.5, 7, 14.3. So he's a very safe flex option with like a pretty high floor for a flex and somebody you probably drafted in like the 14th, 13th round. Then the next player, Josh Jacobs. Josh Jacobs hasn't really done much, but with all of the chaos the Raiders are going through with John Gruden right now, they're going to need to, like, this coordinator is going to have to figure out the playbook, or the new head coach is going to have to figure out the playbook, figure out what works, and try to replicate what they were doing that works. And they did run the ball a lot through Josh Jacobs. We saw a huge uptick in Josh Jacobs' targets. I think you could definitely trade for Josh Jacobs at a pretty, like, you could probably find someone who would trade, again, I'm just going to stick with Julio Jones, but you could probably trade Julio Jones for Josh Jacobs, or Odell Beckham for Josh Jacobs. It's probably a safer option. And A.J. Brown has played horrible through this year. I want to see on Sleeper which rank he has as, so he is the wide receiver 77 currently. This will change. A.J. Brown has always typically had a slow start. They have a pretty tough matchup this week, week 6 against Buffalo. If you want to wait, you can probably get him for cheap now. He's probably going to not do much against Buffalo, but he will explode week 7 against the Chiefs. And I think from there, he's going to take off again. So hold on. You can either hold on and wait for him to suck again, or I would trade for him now. You definitely could trade for him now. And I think that he's just a talent where it doesn't matter. Like, he's so talented that eventually he'll pop off. But these are my trade targets. This is what I would do going into, if I had to fix my fantasy team, those are the players I'm looking at. But as always, guys, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. If you're watching on YouTube, please go ahead and like, comment, subscribe. It helps the channel out a lot. And if you are listening on Spotify, please click the follow button, share it to a friend, tell everybody you found the coolest podcast ever, and it's turned you into a winner. And if you already were a winner, it turned you into an alpha winner. So that's going to do it for us. Check us out on Instagram. We post a lot of the content that we post on YouTube. We condense into Instagram posts. So check that out. Check us out on Twitter at Pylon_the. We tweet NFL news and some hot takes and some funny tweets. And then on Instagram, I didn't say it, but we're at _Pylon_Cam. Please recommend this to a friend. Please tell someone to go ahead and watch it and, give it a listen. But that's going to do it for me. That's going to do it for this episode. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you guys on Thursday. Without further ado, I bid thee a farewell. Peace!